What is going on, Snooker fans, and welcome back to the channel, where today we will be reviewing last week's Scottish Open, a tournament that in truth I have always felt a little bit sorry for, because it's always, every single season, fallen in this awkward period sort of between the end of the UK Championship finishing and then the new year. And I'm not sure if it's just me, perhaps you will think differently, but as soon as the UK Championship finishes, I'm personally kind of checked out until the new year, until the Masters starts, mainly because I just want to enjoy the festive season and kind of have a little bit of a break from the sport. But particularly this season, you just don't have that choice. You've got, at the end of the UK Championship, which ended a couple of weeks ago, you then had the shootout, you've got the Scottish Open, you've got 2 sets of qualifiers for tournaments next year, and then you've got that invitational event out in Saudi Arabia as well, all before Christmas in this sort of 3-4 week slot. It's very congested this month in a time of the year where I'm not sure if many snooker fans are as invested as they would be elsewhere. Like I say, it could just be me. And the Scottish Open just always falls in this awkward period. And I feel like if it was maybe slightly earlier in the season or slightly later, a lot more people would be tuning in and much more invested in the tournament. But of course, the tournament did still provide us with plenty of talking points. I didn't watch all of it. I kind of watched sporadically throughout the week. But what I did watch was some really good matches. And it's another fantastic tournament for China and Chinese players. I've got a video that I've been working on for the past couple of weeks coming out in the next few days. And that's where I talk about the future of the sport and how it looks just so increasingly likely that the future really is going to be in China. And this is the 3rd tournament of the season already, where you have a semi-final lineup where 3 of the 4 semi-finalists are Chinese. This year we had Zhao Guodong, Wu Yize, and the eventual champion Li Paifan, who I'll get to later. Now, yes, of course, the tournament did open itself up. Players like Judd Trump, Ronnie O'Sullivan, Mark Williams, they all withdrew from the tournament before it even started. And then you had Mark Selby, Sean Murphy, Neil Robertson, Kyle Wilson, all of them lost early as well. So the draw really did open itself up, and it did invite someone lower down the rankings to do what Li Paifan done. But that's not to take anything away from him. He was fantastic all through the tournament. He picked up some massive victories as well. Looking through the draw in general, Luca Brissell, first quarterfinal of the season. And you know what? I really enjoyed that sort of fire in the belly kind of interview that he gave. He was a bit bullish. He was saying that he was disappointed that people had been targeted him, and he's been practicing really hard, which is massive, because we've said it a lot this season that there is a very real possibility that he could fall off tour. Now, the victories he got in Scotland probably means that he's going to be safe regardless of what happens now. But it was a very real risk, and he had to take the sport seriously again. Obviously, he's training for the Ironman that he wants to do in a few years, and of course, that's up to him. But yeah, he had to dedicate himself back to the sport again, because he's far too good a player to be even at risk of falling off tour, regardless of being potentially in the 40s or the 50s in the rankings come the season end. Then there was also Jack Lisowski, and as the draw was opening up, you thought, maybe, is this going to be the week? Finally the week that he gets over the line. As is so often the case, it got to the quarterfinals and he couldn't quite make it. But this time, there's no criticism of Jack. You know, a lot of the time when he gets to these positions, you see him play so well at the start of the tournament, and then he gets to a quarterfinal, a semi-final, you know, the real business end, and he fails to deliver his absolute best. This time, you know, he played really well in that quarterfinal against Mark Allen. Mark Allen played really well as well. And, you know, but for that split that went wrong in the decider, he very well could have won that match. And who knows, maybe he would have come away with the title. He keeps knocking on the door. He keeps putting himself into these positions, which is to his absolute credit. But you just wonder, at what point is it going to happen, if it's ever going to happen at all? And then speaking of Mark Allen, by far and away his best performances of the season so far. Okay, he's reached semi-finals of the season already, you know, out at the Champion of Champions, at the UK Championship, but nowhere has he played as well as he did last week in Scotland. You know, his scoring was back to its brilliant best. He looked fluent. It looked like he was really enjoying it out there. And in all truth, he'll be disappointed with how it ended. You know, he went 5-2 up against Li Paifan in the semi-final that he would have been the strong favourite for. Okay, he wasn't playing as well as he had been in that semi-final, but still was tough enough to get himself a big lead. And you won't see him lose from 5-2 ahead too often this season because of the player that he's become. So that will disappoint him, but promising signs, and I do think a tournament win will at some point happen this season for him. Elsewhere, there was Stuart Bingham, and there was a point in the tournament where I was looking at the draw open up and Bingham was still in the tournament, and I thought, wow, he's got a real opportunity here. It's been a long time coming since Bingham has won his last tournament, but he played well, of course, at the World Championship back in the spring, qualified for the UK Championship. He's playing well enough, and I did think sort of around that last 32, last 16, that he could be an outside bet there. Unfortunately for him, he lost in the last 16 to Li Fan, and he's another player where you wonder whether he is ever going to win another tournament, but he's still playing well enough, clearly, and on the biggest occasions, he gets the best out of him. Just a shame for him that he couldn't quite deliver last week. Noppon Sankam is another player that I wanted to briefly touch upon in this video. Very similar to Jack Lisowski, not in terms of playing style, but I talked about Jack earlier in the video, about how Jack consistently gets to the latter stages of tournaments, but just isn't able to quite put them away and land a first title. Noppon Sankam, very similar. Previous ranking event finalist. He's gone to plenty of quarterfinals and semi-finals as well, and he just can't quite get over the line. Last week, no real criticism at all. He also lost to Mark Allen in the tournament, and then you looked at him, he beat Mark Selby, beat Ali Carter, 2 massive wins against players, both of whom were playing really well themselves. And Noppon, he's got so much to like. I feel like Thailand is going to produce a ranking event winner at some point, and everyone talks about Tepchero because of the flair and the excitement, but Noppon Sankam is by far and away a more solid, more compact player, someone who is far more likely to win a tournament. And you have to give credit for the amount of times that he keeps putting himself into positions like this where he could challenge for a title. But question marks, of course, get raised when you get there so often and can't quite deliver. And that question is it ever going to happen? There's also Tom Ford. Definitely need to talk about him. I didn't review the snooker shootout because it's not really a tournament that can be reviewed, just a complete lottery, an exhibition event. But of course he won it, and it was a very emotional win for him. He's obviously had the very sad passing of a friend of his who he dedicated that win to. But, going into the UK Championship qualifiers, he had only won 2 matches all season. So that win at the shootout has clearly given him a bit of a boost because he won 3 matches in Scotland, including a win over Neil Robertson. And he'll be hoping that this maybe small purple patch continues because he's dropped right out of the top 16, which is where he started at the beginning of the season. Whether he can get back in time for the World Championship, who knows, but it will definitely be good for him to start picking up results again. And then there's also Mr. Consistent Chris Wakelin, who got himself into another quarter-final. Just like Jack Lisowski, just like Noppon Sankam, the frequency that he is reaching the latter stages of tournaments is so impressive. He done it again, obviously this time narrowly lost to Wu Yiza in the quarterfinals. But that consistency is what's made him now a top 16 player. And you do feel like it's going to be only a matter of time before he finally gets himself a tournament win. But let's move on to that trio of semi-finalists from China, shall we? Starting with Zhao Guodong, the beaten semi-finalist. Such a superb tournament that he's having. The Zhang Anda of this season. Okay, Zhang Anda was more of a wild card than Zhao Guodong was at the start of the season, but still, I don't think anyone really saw this coming. He's won a tournament. This is now 2 semi-finals that he's made. He's safely in the top 16, and he just looks a completely different player. It's amazing what confidence can do, and snooker is all about mentality. I suppose all sports are in a way, but with snooker, when you're talking about talent, the difference between the world number 1 and the world number 50, of course there is a difference, but the difference isn't massive. It's all about what's happening between the years and the confidence. And Zhao Guodong's confidence is sky high. Again, he might be slightly disappointed that he didn't reach the final. He was 4-2 up in that semi-final against Wu Yiza before losing 6-4. But in general, what a season he's having. And the man that beat him, Wu Yiza, following up that appearance at the final of the English Open by getting to another final of a home nations event in very quick time. He's got over that painful defeat to Neil Robertson very quickly. The only disappointment for Wu Yiza is in that final against Neil, he was, of course, a complete underdog. No one was really expecting him to beat Neil, even if it had been so long since Neil had previously won a tournament. This time around, though, he was playing someone 50-odd places below him in the rankings, a player who had never even reached a quarter-final before that week. Ru Yizhou was the favourite in that tournament, and he may be disappointed that it again took him too long to get into the match. You know, he was 4-0 down against Neil Robertson in the English Open. Okay, he was very close to pulling off an insane comeback in that final. But again, he found himself 4-0 down again in this final. And it doesn't matter who you're playing, and it doesn't matter the length of a match. When you're 4-0 down, you give yourself such a mountain to climb. And again, that proved too difficult for him to mount. But a fantastic week. You know, 2 finals in half a season is very, very impressive. And there's just so much Chinese talent. And he is one of them who is making real big moves at the rankings at the moment. And then the winner himself, Li Paifan, 21 years old, never reached a quarter-final of any tournament before, goes on and becomes the lowest ranked player to win a ranking title for some 30 years, I think I saw from World Snooker. And looking at it now, 1993 was the last time a player as low as him in the rankings won a ranking title. Fantastic. And his performances were brilliant. You know, he's beaten Sean Murphy, he's beaten Stuart Bingham, he's beat Mark Allen from 5-2 down in the semi-finals. And then, you know, the final, it was a real great display of long potting from both players, particularly Li Paifan, when I think most people would have expected Ru Yizhou to be the really prominent long pot in that match. But Li Paifan knocked in some fantastic long balls. They both missed a lot from close range, which would have disappointed them, obviously. But, you know, he held himself together very well. And this is brilliant. You know, it's fantastic. Both of them real youngsters, the real future of this game. And Li Paifan, no one was talking about him before this tournament. He is now a tournament winner. I've mentioned several players during this sort of span of this video who have been around for a long, long time, been super consistent and never won a title. Well, Li Paifan, he's come straight in and done that. Of course, he's got no battle scars. He's got no sort of sense of expectation around him to sort of weigh on his head. But a fantastic, fantastic week. And look, the question gets raised all the time when a player comes out of the blue and wins a tournament. And that question is, was this... Fluke is the wrong word. You don't fluke a tournament. You don't fluke 6 wins to win a big tournament, particularly beating the players that he won. But the question is, was this a one-time thing? Or can he become consistent and, you know, continue to work his way up the rankings and potentially get himself into positions to win more titles in the future? That's the question for him. But at 21 years of age, to win a title is very, very promising.